Smoke and Sacrifice for the Nintendo Switch and PC, with a PS4 and Xbox One release coming later this year, is a game that I've been playing for over 2 months now, and this is a video that I've been working on for just as long. I received a press copy from the publisher at the start of June, with plans to put this video out at the end of that month. However, every time I've had this script ready to go and had my thoughts organized in a way that I thought satisfied me, I paused, I scrapped it, and I went right back to the game to play just a little bit more. The reason I'm saying all this, rather than diving right into the review, is that this is something that's never happened to me before in my 2+ years reviewing games here on this channel, and I don't think that's a good thing. Before I go into why, let me explain what Smoke and Sacrifice is. This RPG puts you in the shoes of Sachi, a new mother in a world where the sun has run out of energy, leaving only a tiny pocket of humanity left in the otherwise frozen world. This little village runs on the energy of the Sun Tree, a machine god that supposedly continues to provide light and warmth based on human sacrifice. Every villager must present their firstborn child to the Sun Tree's priests and watch as they're obliterated. Or are they? Well, Sachi at the last minute changes her mind when presenting her baby Leo for sacrifice, and soon after she finds out that Leo may well be alive. She meets a mysterious trader who gives her a pendant and heads back to the temple's altar, which turns out to be a teleporter to the underworld. Here she vows to find her son and figure out why the priests have lied to the villagers for so long, but not before completing hours upon hours of fetch quests. This is the crux of my issue with Smoke and Sacrifice. I love the concept behind it, the mystery, the intrigue. It hooked me in very strongly. However, this game is 10 to 15 hours long, and almost all of the main quest line feels like filler. The game itself plays just fine. Imagine Don't Starve if that game had a more story-driven narrative rather than being just about survival. As you can tell by the visuals, Smoke and Sacrifice is very clearly inspired by Don't Starve, and it does a decent job at twisting that formula around a little bit. While there is a day-night cycle here, it's actually based around something called smoke time. The people down below, known as the Dreer, can only work during the daytime, mining and producing minerals for the priests to use up on the surface. Once smoke time hits, the entire world is filled with a thick cloud of, well, smoke. It becomes impossible to breathe without a light source, such as that pendant that the trader gave you before, and the creatures of the underworld become much more aggressive. Even the Dreer villages aren't safe during smoke time, as ghosts may hang around and try to fight you there. The underworld in Smoke and Sacrifice is decently varied, although it's only split into a handful of ecosystems that are just sort of sprinkled around the map. There are forests and swamps, icy tundras, these work areas with electrical floor paneling, smoldering lava plains, and even irradiated ruins. Each of these is home to its own brand of enemies, and outside of the forests, they all require customized gear to access. Walking onto charged flooring without rubber boots will get you killed very quickly, just as walking onto the bog surrounding the entire world will no matter what you wear. All of this gear, along with a wide variety of weapons, items, and food, has to be crafted using one of the game's recipes, and often using a different workstation across the world, such as a cooking pot, crafting bench, hydraulic press, and so on. Thankfully, spread across this world are these transport pipes that you can travel between, which cuts out a huge chunk of potential tedium. All you need to do is activate them by spending 3 of the Dreer coins you'll find throughout your adventure, and we'll touch on those coins in a little bit. In many ways, the overworld's, or rather underworld structure almost reminds me of a Metroidvania game. Coming back to previous areas with new gear lets you travel to those spots that you just couldn't reach before, finding new towns, equipment, chests, and much more. There are even many different kinds of recipe cards spread across the map that may require a specific item to reveal. One thing I love is that every Dreer in a specific area will count as the same person for side quests. If they're asking you to give them hog milk, anybody in that swamp will take that milk. I really wish the rest of the main questline were that helpful. See, the storyline in Smoke and Sacrifice is a Byzantine affair, so much so that when I received my press copy, the rep I spoke to emailed me a whole list of tips. Shortly thereafter, an entire page on the developer's website was opened, giving you a step-by-step guide through the game and every single quest. It's not so much that the game is hard enough to justify that, although the third act does get pretty brutal as it throws you to the wolves with underpowered weapons. Instead, it's that the game gives almost no direction at many points. Several times in each of the game's 3 acts, Sachi is told to fetch some random items obtained by killing enemies, and then told to kill some other random enemies for different items, and then craft a new item using some other items from other enemies, which she'll use to go to the next area and kill some more random enemies for other items. I wish I was exaggerating, but the game even directly lampshades this near the end of the story, when you're told to grab a bunch of items one after the other. No fewer than half of each of the quests in each act are dedicated to fetching stuff. Even better, there are times when the game either only mentions once or outright doesn't tell you at all how to obtain one of those very items that you need. Sun God forbid if you start a quest and then put the game down for a couple days. You'd better use that guide, because the quest givers certainly don't like to repeat themselves in-game. And at the end of each act, or after major boss fights, when you'd expect to get more answers like, "Where's my son? What are the Dreer doing down here? What's going on?" You're without fail met with, "Go to the other priest and he'll tell you." Even fighting these priests is often a pain, because they'll politely ask you to come to another area just to fight them. This is why this video took so long. I kept feeling like I had enough to go off of to review the game, but every time I kept saying to myself, no, maybe it gets better. It never gets better. I've beaten the game, I've completed almost every side quest, I've unlocked all but a couple recipes, I've dealt with the awful inventory management system, I've done it all, and the storyline never felt worth it to me. It was one speck of potential brilliance watered down in an ocean of boring. Whew, let's backtrack and talk about that inventory for a little bit. Imagine the usual Minecraft-esque inventory system that you're used to dealing with in most indie games that involve crafting. That's the baseline here. But then add in a twist that most items in the game are perishable. If you collect a bunch of sour fruit, you'd better not forget to make some juice out of it at one of the game's 4 or 5 cooking pots, because otherwise they're gonna go bad and you just wasted all that time. That's not too bad by itself, but when so many of the game's crafted items require a specific workstation, it means you're going to backtrack to these same 3 places a lot. There's no real place to buy health items either. There are a few vending machines, but they cost 3 Dreer tokens each, and those tokens are a rare commodity. You can't easily get them in the first 2/3 of the game unless you go out of your way to do a bunch of the side quests. Usually it's better to save the tokens you do have for a travel tube. It's a lot worse if you run out of coins near a closed tube and have to walk all the way back to the nearest one if you're low on health. Now yes, you can absolutely go back to the early areas and farm for items to make a bunch of permanent health potions and whatnot, but Smoke and Sacrifice clearly doesn't respect the player's time with how many filler quests they use to pad the game out, rather than trying to draw you in with a story that continues to engage the player. The last thing I want to do is spend another hour or 2 punching trees for fruit just to make the game slightly less tedious for the following hour. And all of what I just mentioned is discounting a bunch of things that the development team just patched in a huge quality of life update at the start of August. Before, you had to manually select the item in your inventory to give it to somebody, rather than just press the X button conveniently. And finding the right item was so much fun before a couple weeks ago, when there was no quicksort option for your inventory. Even better, most of the game's quest log information was even more nebulous than it is right now. I have no idea how so many of these issues got past the playtesting phase. But in a game that costs $25, it is outright unacceptable. I'm glad I did hold off on the review, because I can happily say a bunch of my bigger issues were cleaned up, but I'm simultaneously disappointed to say that it wasn't nearly enough. There's still no way, as far as I've seen, for you to increase Sachi's inventory, and by the time you're on Act 2 or 3, almost half of it is permanently locked up with weapons and items that you'll probably need for the rest of the journey. I still ran into a few major crashes and some significant frame drops throughout my experience as well, both before and after the patch. Even today, you can just spawn next to enemies when the game loads a save point or a travel tube. It's incredibly disappointing. I think that Smoke and Sacrifice had a lot going for it right when it started, but after 2 hours, you've seen the very best that this game has to offer. After that, it has short spikes of enjoyable moments, but the game continues to trend further and further downward as it gets more repetitive, more tedious, and the cracks start to widen. If it were a $10 game, maybe even $15, it would be a lot easier for me to recommend it despite all of these issues, because the mechanics are solid enough. The game is beautifully hand-drawn, and the world is interesting to explore for at least a little while. But again, at $25, I think it's far too expensive to recommend over other indie games out there, including the very game that seemed to heavily inspire it. With all that said, if you've played Smoke and Sacrifice already, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't, do you think you're gonna pick it up? Let me know down below. While you're down there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button, and if you're not already, subscribe for more of these mini reviews, my more formatted main series of game reviews, and much, much more.